హలో రావురారెడ్డి గారు. చారీ రెడీ కదా? నిన్నటి లింక్ ఓపెన్ చేసేసుకో. నిన్న ఈవినింగ్ ఇచ్చాను కదా లింక్, అది ఓపెన్ చేసేసుకో, జాయిన్ అయిపో. హలో, నేను ఈవినింగ్ ఓపెన్ అయ్యావు కదా, అదే లింక్. యా ఓకే. కృష్ణ, డాక్టర్ కృష్ణ ఇచ్చాను నువ్వు. ఓకే, రైట్. యా. వచ్చారు ఆయన లైన్లోకి. వీళ్ళు ఇలా జాయిన్ అవుతూ ఉంటారు. ఇంకా 5 minutes లో బింగ్ చేసేద్దాం. ఎందుకంటే యూట్యూబ్లో ఇంకోటి వెళ్ళింది కదా, అందులోకి వెళ్ళిపోతుంటారు. ఇప్పుడు నేను అంటే ఇప్పుడు ఇది ఉంది కదా, వ్యూలో మ్యూట్ అన్మ్యూట్ ఉంది కదా పార్టిసిపెంట్లో. అందులో మ్యూటాలు అన్మ్యూటాలు కొంచెం నాకు హైలైట్ అయ్యేలా చూడవా? అది నాకు హైలైట్ చేస్తే నేను అన్మ్యూట్ చేసేస్తాను. ఆ, చేస్తున్నా. దగ్గరికి వస్తే రిఫ్లెక్షన్ ఇచ్చేస్తుంది. అంటే వెళ్ళిపో, దగ్గరికి వస్తే రిఫ్లెక్షన్ ఇచ్చేస్తుంది. బిగిన్ చేశానా? బిగిన్ చేశానా? అందరూ యూట్యూబ్‌లోకి వెళ్ళిపోయారు. అందరూ యూట్యూబ్‌లోకి పోన్లే ఇంక ఏదో ఒకటిలే. ఎందుకంటే అది ఈజీ కదా! అందరూ అందులోనే ఉన్నారు. ఇప్పుడు అదే బిగిన్ చేసేస్తాను. ఇప్పుడేంటంటే మ్యూటాలు, అన్‌మ్యూటాలు అది ఓపెన్ చేసేస్తే ఇంక నేను ఇప్పుడు ఫస్టు ఒకసారి హ్మ్. ఒకసారి నా వీడియో పైకొచ్చేలా చూస్తే నేను మాట్లాడి ఆయనకిచ్చి ఆయన ప్రెజెంటేషన్ స్టార్ట్ చేసేదాకా ఉంటే సరిపోద్ది. బిగిన్ చేసేస్తాను ఇంక 2 మినిట్స్‌లో. రైట్. ఏంటి అందరూ యూట్యూబ్‌లోకి వెళ్ళిపోయారేంటి? ఆ! అది ఈజీ కదా! మొత్తం అందరూ యూట్యూబ్‌లోకి వెళ్ళిపోయినట్టున్నారు. అదే యూట్యూబ్‌లోకి కూడా కొన్ని స్క్రీన్ షాట్లు తీయండి. చాటింగ్‌లో వస్తాయి కదా! అదే సమస్య. ఇప్పుడు మాక్సిమం యూట్యూబ్‌లోనే ఉంటారులే బహుశా. ఓకే. స్టార్ట్ చేసేస్తున్నాను. కొంచెం స్క్రీన్ జాగ్రత్తగా చూడండవి. అదే. Hello, good morning everyone. Am I audible now? Please raise your hand. Am I audible now? కాసేపు. హలో. అందరూ యూట్యూబ్‌లోకి వెళ్ళిపోయినట్టున్నారుగా? ఆ! అదే యూట్యూబ్‌లో ఎక్కువున్నట్టున్నారు. ఈజీ కదా అది. ఓకే. ఓకే. పోనీలే. యూట్యూబ్‌లో కూడా కొన్ని షార్ట్స్, స్క్రీన్ షాట్స్ తీయండి. స్టార్ట్ చేసేస్తున్నాను నేను. ఓకే. రైట్. రైట్. మనకే లోడ్ తగ్గుద్దిలే దీని మీద. అయ్యయ్యో! Hello, am I audible now? Please raise your hand. Hello. So good morning everyone. Okay. నాది స్క్రీన్ హైలైట్ చేసేస్తే ఇంక స్టార్ట్ చేసేస్తా. ఓకే. థాంక్ యూ. Reddy garu, good morning, sir. Just view my screen, sir, please. View my own screen first. My screen, my screen. Just okay, okay. So full screen, my picture once first. Only single view. Okay, okay, okay. Very good, very good. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to this very important international web talk on Spanish flu to COVID-19 and emergence of India as global team player in management of pandemics. And I really appreciate the participants from various sectors like industries, research organizations, academic institutions, research scholars, and very smart students because of their interest to know something and to do something because of these seminars and all. And please accept my namaste to all of you. And let me tell you what is the importance of this particular seminar. What is the motivation for this particular seminar? As everyone knows, how this particular COVID 19 has become a global pandemic and what are its impact. And apart from this kind of what you call this human mortality, and it has huge impact on several sectors like industrial sector, agriculture, and population and sustainable maintenance, education. Every corner or every sector, if you look at, there is a huge impact, and the people are not even ready to go outside for their livelihood activities and all. So this is a very bad situation. And another important thing is here, if you look at this particular thing, now there is no guarantee for this kind of pandemic, how long it continues. And now the people are getting a kind of what you call questionnaire among themselves, what to do and how to do and why to do. Because even if you look at this particular Indian situation, now it is a very huge situation in such a way that even if you look at these newspapers and the TVs and all, the situation is becoming worse. And because of this, a lot of questions are being erased. How long it continues, how it happens, whether we can sustain or not. These are all the most important questions rising among the brains of many of the um, human beings, not only for the administrators, academicians, and bureaucrats, politicians, for everyone, it is a big problem. And in particular, for research scientists, there is a huge stress on these research scientists, what they are supposed to do, how they can support this kind of human population in particular. Because this is the particular situation everyone knows and everyone feels that we are not having a particular medicine, we are not having a particular vaccine for this particular thing, and what to do and how we can get off all these things. And another thing is, if you are looking at this kind of pandemic situation, it is happening in such a way that, and you are getting some sort of information, the virus is being changed because of its mutations and all. And the impact is also getting increased in some areas and getting decreased in some areas. And again, it's a kind of a floating matter, something like that. How it is happens, why it is happening, and in particular thing that how to just manage this kind of situation to have our sustainable life. So these are the many of the questions each and every individual is having. So to clarify most of the questions, how this particular virus has been come out, how it is impacting the society, and how best, in fact, we should have our own protection, and what are the things happening. And one more thing is that India, many people feel that in India, there is no progress as far as the development of vaccines are concerned and the development of what you call medicines are concerned. But it is not at all correct. And India has become a global player in many of the activities, even in particular scientific and technological aspects. That is the reason that many of the global companies are having CEOs or managing directors from Indian side. So to clarify this, and also let you to know what are the things happening actually in India regarding the progress of development of vaccines and all, medicines and what are the cares, in fact, we are supposed to take all these things. We need to clarify all these things. So that is the reason we have a very good expert here. And I'm so happy that we have an expert here. I is a research scientist, an excellent research scientist, industrial research scientist. Now he is with us that and it's most fortunate as for us to have this his presence to meet our research person, the presenter for this particular thing. He is Dr. Krishna Maringanti. And before going to hand over to Dr. Krishna, I just like to have a small introduction to Dr. Krishna. So the presenter for this particular session is Dr. Krishna Maringanti. He is the Managing Director and the Chief Executive Officer for Polabs Pharma Limited. And coming for his particular educational background and all, he is originated from United Andhra Pradesh, hailing from Krishna district in United Andhra Pradesh. And he has a very strong educational background. He had his post-graduation degree from Andhra University. Then he obtained his PhD from one of the centers of excellence in India, not only in India, in the world's reputed institutions, the University of Hyderabad, that is Central University of Hyderabad, in organic synthesis. And after obtaining his PhD, he had been to US and he worked for his PDF in Houston. And then he continued his continual research for the development of so many products, medicine-oriented products, drug designing, drug delivery, drug identification, total synthesis, everything and all, in so many reputed organizations with uh, extraordinary scientists, industries, and academicians, both in India and abroad, in particular US, Japan, Germany, and China. And to his credit, he had excellent research publications like in Nature, Journal of Organic Chemistry, JOCS, what you call Journal of American Chemical Society. These are all highly reputed international journals, and where he was co-authorized with many of the persons. Almost some of his co-researchers were also very close to have these Nobel Prizes soon. And another important thing is he is an effective public speaker, and he can impress with any kind of audience with his voice and with his speeches and the content delivery. And he is a visiting faculty for many of the universities in India and in abroad. And he is very contributory social researcher. And his inspiration is leading to many of the young researchers as a mentor. So many researchers, academicians are working with him as a collaborative research in so many centers of excellence. Like he is continuing his collaborative research as a kind of consultancy at the mentoring and all in many of the IITs in India and also centers of excellence in international, in particular China, Japan, Germany, and US. And these kind of contributory researchers in drug designing, drug delivery, and drug identification for a proper solution are making him an excellent. And presently, he is looking over the research and the CDMO operations in Polabs Pharma. As I already told you, he is an active researcher. And apart from these very specialties, he is an active mountain trekker and blogger. These are all some to say about our presenter, Dr. Krishna Maringanti. And I feel that you will be enjoying this presentation. And I think he will clarify so many things, what actually you are having. With this particular small introduction of our presenter, now I am handing over to Dr. Krishna M to take over. Dr. Krishna Maringatti, sir, the presenter, most welcome you, sir. On behalf of our management, our Honorable Chairman, Sri Sachinan Raj Garu, and our Vice Chairman, Sri Shesha Garu, who are backbone to us to yield all these activities. And on behalf of the audience, actually, we had a huge participation. And fortunately, because of the scalability and all, we gave a live YouTube channel. Many of the participants, in particular young researchers, are watching this particular live broadcast through the YouTube. And many of the participants will be having this opportunity to hear to you. Now, I request you with a warm welcome to present you, sir. Welcome, sir. Thank you. Over to Dr. Krishna. Dr. Krishna, please unmute you, sir, please.
Yeah. Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Razu. That's extremely flattering. And I hope that I'll be able to live up to your expectation up to a certain extent. Now, I need to get this over here, right?
Screen share.
Get the screen sharing. Yeah. And I do agree with Dr. Razu that I've been fortunate to have worked with some extremely eminent scholars, and which has been very enriching and entertaining, what I would say, because I've been a curious guy from the beginning, and that's what makes anybody a scientist. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Razu, am I audible to everyone? Audible
yes, sir. Yes, very good. Very good it is.
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much. And I believe that I think without further ado, we go straight to the presentation. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir. Please.
Hope everyone is doing good during the pandemic times. And I hope that the lockdown has been lifted in most of the towns. I think it is kind of limited to the containment zones now. And this is a very unique situation for all of us. So when Dr. Razu asked me to present on COVID, I thought we draw certain references from the kind of experiences we had in terms of dealing with the pandemics in the past. Because most of the lessons that we learned in the past, they are going to be the guiding beacons. And they actually shows the way, like how we handle a new threat like Spanish flu. So I think without further ado, I go straight to the presentation. So before we actually get into as a preamble, I would just like to draw your attention to our state of mind. The beginning of this year, between January and February 2020, our state of mind actually that was focused on a couple of other bigger concerns that we had at that point of time. Because China just started reporting these cases, and the biggest concern was the US-China trade dispute. And the Brexit was another bigger concern, because these two players, the US, China, and Europe, they influence the economy of the world to a large extent. You may recall that most of the nations with the highest GDP are these countries, like US, Canada. Canada is, of course, out of dispute. The US-China trade dispute was one of the things that was ravaging in that time. And one of the most important, issues why we are concerned about the US-China trade dispute was China's kind of workshop for the entire world. Can we have the other mic muted also, because I see a lot of disturbance.
Yeah,
thank you. So, you may recall that China is a workshop for the entire world. A lot of stuff that we actually use as feedstock raw materials, from smartphones to electronics to automobile spare parts to feed raw materials, to, pharmaceuticals, plastics, machinery, whatnot. China is actually the workshop for the entire world. Without the supply chain coming from China, a lot of production in other countries, that's going to be affected. Because, we are largely dependent on, from the chemistry standpoint, like when we make pharmaceuticals, we are dependent on China for getting most of the feedstock raw materials. Also for certain, intermediates, advanced intermediates, because India as a country, it is kind of excuse of the last few steps in the synthesis of APIs. And our major strength is actually into formulation. So we are pretty good with the documentation. We have some of the largest number of DMFs filed in the entire world, actually, compared to even we are better than countries like Spain and Italy and a lot of other European countries. So we're in pretty good shape when it comes to regulatory filing. Actually, that's what differentiates India. Like why India is one of the leaders, global leaders in terms of pharmaceuticals is the excellence that India had in terms of regulatory markets. Chinese market has been, its total bench top workshop kind of thing. The way you look at some of these manufacturing sites, like chipsets and other things, it's just like a shed. They have huge productivity. But the bottom line is, if the US-China trade dispute continues, that's going to have deleterious effect on the trade of a lot of other countries. Because these things are all, cooperative, mutually cooperative and complementary. And as we progress in the talk, I'm also going to mention these two terms, cooperativity and complementarity, in terms of the definition of life, in terms of the replication of viruses also. But right now, suffice it to say, US-China trade dispute was our topmost concern in January, February 2020. And Brexit also another one. I believe that the Brexit happened towards the end of last year. Finally, Johnson and his team, they could ratify it in the UK Parliament. But this Brexit delays and the consequences of Brexit, Britain decided to exit from the European Union. That led to certain trust deficit between the European countries and UK, and also, it kind of created a wedge, what I would say, not only between UK and rest of Europe, but also between UK and a few other countries, especially US. And there is also the third, I would like to stress this thing. The third most important concern was the possible pandemic spreading in China. Because globally, people understand the consequences of pandemics. Because the pandemics not only have deleterious effect on life, but they also affect the economy, they affect the livelihoods. And to cut a long story short, by the time we arrived in March, by mid-March, a lot of countries decided to lock down. And we have seen the plummeting of the stock market. And you'll be wondering, what a pandemic has to do with the stock market collapse. Why would the stock markets have, what they have anything to do? Because they're all swanky buildings in big towns, and pandemic is spreading through people. But of course, like those guys who are sitting in those swanky buildings, they're also people. The fundamental reason why a pandemic will lead to stock market spiraling is a pandemic means a lot of people cannot work, a lot of lockdowns. Lockdown means goods cannot move from one place, A to B. If goods cannot move from A to B, that leads to trade uncertainty. The whole stock market built upon the concept of trade. So whenever there is trade uncertainty, stock market collapses. And that's what happened. And to counterbalance, the moment investor loses confidence, he tries to buy the stock. The moment he has confidence in the market, he puts the money in the stock. To counterbalance this thing, the governments have been trying to declare a lot of economic measures. We'll come to that later. Now, coming to this talk, this is kind of divided into a couple of portions. The first thing, we try to understand how these pandemics and viruses induce illnesses and what are the facts, that pervade these the spread of pandemics. How do we understand these things? And what is all the gamut of statistics that we have been seeing on a day-to-day basis? And what is with this doubling rate, and what is with the the CFRs, CRRs that people have been talking? What's all this statistical know-how, mumbo jumbo that we have been exposed to recently? And then we move on to more scientific aspect, like why we do not have so many therapies. Like the reason for kind of prostration that we have when the COVID caught us by surprise. Why we do not have proper medication? Why we are using weird things as prophylactic medicine, something like hydroxychloroquine, and somebody suggested, in Iran, people started drinking pooch, that's illegal alcohol, and actually illegal alcohol killed more people than COVID at some point of time in Iran. And I believe that President Trump, he advised, some kind of injection of antibacterials or putting some kind of UV light on people to get rid of the COVID. Like we are getting all kinds of weird ideas. So we see like why the discovery and why the commercialization of antiviral drugs is different and a lot more difficult than discovery of drugs with other diseases, for example, CNS or antibacterials, or even with cancer, where we have a very well-defined target that can be attacked. Okay. And then we also cover a couple of aspects like vaccines. And most importantly, as the talk is also mentioned a couple of times, where does India stand in the entire spectrum of activities, right? From the management, from public health point of view, to the supply, global supply of essential medicines. And where do we stand compared with, I would like to draw obvious comparisons with an earlier pandemic. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, there was a pandemic in 1918. It was so red because, none of us are born at that time. That was the end of the World War I. That was called, it was the first global flu. It was a flu pandemic, H1N1. That killed a lot of people. And believe me, in India, about 12 million people died during the first pandemic of flu in 1918. Between 1918 and 1919, a lot of people in India died. And the situation was extremely miserable, horrible, like there was no medication. The only medication known was aspirin. And we discussed those aspects point by point as we go forward. Now, as I said, we try to understand what's with this term virus. I hope that all of you can see something that's looking like a bouquet, that red and white, very beautiful thing. Actually, there's a computer representation of an HIV virus. Now, these things look extremely beautiful, and they are there everywhere. What exactly is virus? If you look at the standard Webster definition, an infective agent that typically consists of a nucleic acid molecule in a protein coat is too small to be seen by light microscopy and is able to multiply only within the living cells of a host. Now, the crucial part, too small to be seen by light microscopy. That's the reason why these viruses have kind of eluded the detection and attention of people for a long time. And trust me, the number of viruses are huge. Like, 10 nonillion viruses. It's a huge number. Okay, the Avogadro number is 6.24 into 10 to the power of 23. That we believe that is the number of molecules present in a mole. This is much bigger than that. It's at least a billion times bigger than that. Now, but there's so many viruses on Earth, actually they should be infecting practically everything on Earth. And, only they should be surviving. But how come, we all got evolved from the sea to, right now to the stage of having this webinar at this point of time? The reason is not all these viruses are harmful to us. Only a handful of them cause illnesses. One very fundamental reason why a virus, cannot cause illness is virus is a kind of, it's a pretty docile parasite. Viruses, they cannot replicate on their own. Actually, that's one of the reasons that begs to another question. It's a more philosophical question: is virus alive or not? Which we come in the next part of the talk. Now, actually, these viruses, the Latin origin for the term virus, it says it's poison. People use it to think that it's bad air, something not belonging to normal earth. They thought they actually compared this spread of viruses to witchcraft or Saturn mostly. Saturn, like those who are exposed to Bible, Saturn is the epitome of evil. He's a very big evil figure. He's kind of bad boy, big villain. He's Saturn. Now, the second question: who's Diamond Princess? Diamond Princess is not really a princess. Diamond Princess is a ship. It's a cruise ship. And what's the relation between virus and cruise ship? I think we'll come to that discussion eventually. Now, let's have a very cursory look at the types of viruses we have. We have both DNA and RNA-based viruses. As I told you, the virus cannot replicate itself, but it does not mean that it is devoid of, having genetic material. It does have a capsule, it does have a place for DNA or single-stranded RNA, or it can be positive single-stranded RNA or negative single-stranded RNA or double-stranded DNA or even single-stranded DNA. But single-stranded DNA viruses are not very important in terms of human pathology. And the viruses that I mentioned over here, these are the broad viral families that would affect human beings, excepting the tobacco mosaic virus that actually affects plants. Now you see that the virus can have a polyhedral structure, like an adenovirus. What's an example for adenovirus? I guess conjunctivitis is an example for adenovirus. And we have spherical viruses, like an influenza virus. Whatever, having COVID is also a spherical virus. It can be spherical or a kind of a slightly compressed octahedral kind of thing. And bacteriophages are pretty large. Virus is supposed to be very small, but among the viruses, we have pretty large viruses. I think during the course of evolution, some of the viruses, they have grown really big. And bacteriophages, they come into that class. And believe me, the viruses are parasites. They don't leave anything. Viruses parasite on any organism that has a cell. And even some of the bacteria, they are infected by the viruses. So virus can infect everything, that can infect anything living that has a cell. So therefore, we have a lot of plant viruses. For example, tobacco mosaic virus is a plant virus. And some of the viruses, bacteriophages that we find in the sea, they live with the sea bacteria, deep sea bacteria. Now you can see, you must have had some kind of exposure with pandemics earlier. So when we were kids, we all used to get polio drops. Polio drop is a polyvalent vaccine, and they used to give us booster doses also. Unfortunately, this is not an interactive session. Otherwise, I would have asked you, what exactly you mean by monovalent vaccine? What is a polyvalent vaccine? A polyvalent vaccine is something that can kind of effectively inhibit a small family of viruses. Monovalent is something that is absolutely directed. It can stop only one kind of infection. Now, because the viruses mutate, we need to have a kind of vaccine that can take care of a range of mutations. That's very important, crucial. Remember that. I think we'll come back to that later in the talk. Now, the nCoV virus, that is the bone of contention that we have right now, it's a positive single-stranded RNA virus. Same as SARS virus. We had a SARS outbreak in 2003. I think if we have students here, probably they would be kids, and a lot of other people would remember that 2003 SARS virus. I guess I was in China, and I'm not in China, but we did travel to China that time. I remember. Now we also have this dengue, common cold virus, and hepatitis C virus. Hepatitis C virus is also a very important virus. You know, it causes that leads to liver cancer. And for negative stranded RNA viruses, like we have a very, very bad example, Ebola, which is actually, I heard about an Ebola outbreak in Africa right now. During COVID, it's a double whammy for them. Spread of Ebola is extremely bad. And we also have this measles, mumps, rabies. Everybody knows about these things. Like, you know, rabies, everybody knows, I'm sure. Like whoever was bitten by a dog, I hope that you won't get bitten by a dog. You take an anti-rabies vaccine immediately. Influenza, Congo hemorrhagic fever, Lassa fever, etc. I am not mentioning a lot of diseases that are not of common parley in India that we don't see normally. But nevertheless, I decided to add Ebola and Lassa here for reasons that you will know eventually. Now, we talked about, you know, a virus being, you know, an organism that cannot replicate itself. Anything that doesn't grow, obviously that's a question, is it living or non-living? That's another more philosophical question. What is life? And how do you know? How do you know is actually a much more fundamental question. How do we know anything? For example, like, you know, take it as a rhetoric question, rhetorical. I'm not talking about virus or living life per se. I mean, meaning of life per se. How do you know? How do you know anything? There are 4 ways of knowing a thing. One is a divine authority tells you. Somebody comes, wakes up and says that God has told me this thing. He becomes a messiah. The second way of knowing is human authority. Human authority is like the person like who tells others, tells his disciples, whoever listens to him, he heard from the messiah. Messiah is the guy who got the information from God. These are 2 ways of knowing things, but they are non-scientific. Non-scientific because the other 2 ways of knowing things is by experimenting and questioning whatever that is known. You need to question. How do you know? Obviously, if you're not curious, you won't question, and you will stick to the first 2 options, either knowing something by the divine authority or by the human authority. But if you are curious, you have to take the path of science and start actually examining the things by experiment, without bias. And the 4th way of knowing is, doing an experiment itself is not enough. You also have to use logic. By using logic, we understand. We try to hypothesize. A hypothesis can be changed. You know, science is never rigid because science doesn't say anything, it only observes. It tries to understand things. With no bias, and there may be certain assumptions. Now, coming to the question of whether virus is living or non-living, see, what are the basic tenets of life? Basic tenets of life is something that has a capability of self-replication, like it has to replicate itself. That's one of the basic tenets of life. It lives, it can grow, it can replicate, and it ultimately dies. Anything that has life has to die. Unfortunately, virus doesn't fall into that broad category of things that are dying. Some of the scientific discoveries, however great, they can sometimes deleteriously affect the progress of science. And one great example is Professor Stanley of USA. He got a Nobel Prize for crystallizing and characterizing tobacco mosaic virus. Actually, the virus can be crystallized. It's like any other compound. You can't crystallize a human being, you can't crystallize a dog, you can't even crystallize a bacteria, but you can crystallize a virus. Okay. So it has been told, rather, from a philosophical, that their host dependence of replication, viruses are like a box of chemicals with borrowed life. Very poetic. A box of chemicals with borrowed life. Indeed, virus is a box of chemicals, like, it has certain enzymes. It has enzymes like neuraminidase, and it also has one of the streaks of life, what I would say, let's be poetic, the single-stranded RNA or single-stranded DNA or even double-stranded DNA, they are like streaks of life. Like it has, it's not totally life, but it somewhere comes in the gray area of life. It's not dead, it's not living. I think those who studied physics, you remember this particle in a box problem, and Heisenberg's hypothesis. You remember that? Now, it's neither living nor dead, but it can replicate. So for most practical purposes, because of the crystallization, people have considered virus as a curious chemical. And that kind of, that's a little myopic to consider something that's actually affecting human beings as a chemical, and biologists, they didn't have too much interest on viruses except as a curio, an interesting beginning for life, the potential beginning. A lot of people didn't even agree that it is part of life or even life evolved from virus. It's a very debatable question. That kind of led to a kind of stasis in terms of scientific research. Not too many virologists, as you see, if you look at the number of microbiologists, the number of people who pursue virology are not too many. And even the virological labs that we have in India, we have very few centers of excellence for virology, and they're extremely good centers of excellence. For example, the National Institute of Virology that we have in Pune, that's one of the seminal institutions that contributes a lot to the GISAID. The GISAID is something, it's a global organization, we'll talk about it later. Now, we have to agree that virus, leaving the philosophical conundrum, whether a virus is living or non-living, it falls into the gray area between life and, something totally material, chemical, and that actually affects the life deeply. You need to understand that viruses, actually the viral diseases are majority compared to bacterial diseases. Viral diseases are almost 60 to 65% compared to bacterial diseases. Bacterial diseases are a minority, but you think that disease means bacteria most of the times, except for common cold or something like, seasonal measles or stuff like that, right? Now, this actually takes us to the next level. Virus, having agreed that virus falls into the gray area between life and death, we need to attribute certain qualities to the virus. No, we don't really have to attribute. Virus itself attributes because it is very smart. What virus does? It actually hooks to a host cell and it uses all the techniques in the book to evade a immunological response. You know, what is an immunological response? Any foreign body detected in any biological system, that the immunological system detects that foreign body and it tries to neutralize it. If I can draw your attention, let's suppose the way we breathe. When we breathe, how many of you know the breathing process? It's called homeostasis. How oxygen actually enters the body, and it's carried by blood to the brain. And what is the relationship between this and virus that we're talking about? So one of the things that you realize after the lockdowns, I think very reluctantly the government of India asked everybody to start wearing masks. Why do you have to wear a mask? Mask is, let's suppose you are infected and you are in a kind of early stage of inoculation of the virus. You should not infect others that easily, accidentally, to contain the possible spread. And how do we infect, or how do you get infected by others? Through the droplets, aerosols of the virus. When somebody sneezes or when somebody speaks, the viral particles, the viral load is discharged sometimes. It comes out of the mouth and you can accidentally pick up while breathing. And breathing, it's a bulk process. Breathing depends on bulk flow. Like you take a lot of oxygen into your lungs, and the air is kind of the second important, physical aspect is diffusion. The air that goes to the lungs by bulk flow, it is diffused into the blood. And while getting diffused into the blood, it crosses a lot of, very sensitive membranes. We call them mucous membranes that are kind of wet. That gives a fantastic domicile for the virus. And the virus, catches hold of those places, finds the epithelial cells, and, starts infecting the person. And when it starts infecting the person, the virus hooks to the cell, it somehow fuses into the cell, it translates, and then it exits, and it starts replicating. Actually, it uses cell for replication. And the moment a new viral droplet comes out, a new viral particle comes out, the immune system of the body detects, and it starts sending, how many of you have seen a blood report? Blood report, you see there's neutrophils, basophils, all these things. They're indication of an active immune response. If there is an active immune response, obviously you get fever, you start coughing, you get red eye, you get all kinds of indications. The virus, as I said, is smart enough in many cases to actually avoid, to go around getting that kind of a immunological response. So you may be right now, you may be carrying a lot of viruses which are potentially not affecting you. They'll be there. But sometimes what happens is when the virus transmits from a human being to animal, and animal to a bird, and bird to again human being, let's suppose. During these shifts, what we call them, I gave this the last slide. Enzoosis is animal getting affected by pathogen. Zoonosis is the transfer of that pathogen from an animal to human. Okay, enzoosis is an animal getting affected. Zoonosis is the transfer of that pathogen from animal to human. In these transitions, viruses, they develop certain mutations. As we discussed some time ago, these viruses basically they have genetic material, something like RNA or DNA. And we all know that RNA, DNA, they consist of base pairs. What are the base pairs? adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, and if it is RNA, it has uridine. Okay, and it's a temptation to tell you why RNA has only uridine; it does not have cytosine. But I think we'll not have time. We'll move on. Now, these mutations can make a virus extremely virulent, as it happened in the case of 1918 Spanish influenza. We call it mother of all epidemics. 1918 Spanish influenza is called mother of all epidemics. Let me tell you a little story here. 1918 was the period, I believe that's after the murder of the Franz Kaiser Wilhelm in Germany, a world war broke out, and that's what is famously known as the World War I. In the World War I, we had the triads and the Axis, and America joined hands with the Axis forces. And because of there's a war situation, the media was highly censored. So if there's a pandemic in one place, media never reported it, or the government never wanted the media to report it. So because of that, what happened? There were cases here and there of a mild pandemic initially, of a kind of flu that killed a few people that came, and a lot of people shook it off, brushed it off as cold in 1918, early 1918. Italy, France, Spain, and places like that. But because of the war situation, the information did not reach out to others. But nevertheless, some information did reach America. That time, Woodrow Wilson was the president of America. Now, what Woodrow Wilson did is he also censored the information because he wanted to send his soldiers to Europe. And he sent almost 80,000 soldiers in the first one. And I guess he sent another 120,000 soldiers along with doctors, nurses, huge paraphernalia to Europe. While he did that, there were rumors in America about a possible pandemic situation in Europe, but he kind of brushed it off, saying that it's a common cold. Actually, it's very easy to get confused. This is another aspect that probably we'll be discussing. Like, what's the difference between a common cold and an influenza pandemic, COVID-19, SARS, MERS, and a lot of other things. One thing at a time. Now, the Spanish influenza, famously known as the first outbreak of H1N1, that was first reported in Spain. Why Spain? Because Spain was a country that did not participate in World War. That was a neutral zone, Spain. So the media was free. So a lot of doctors said they have found, a strange wave of Spain. Actually, it came. It was a very, very mild outbreak. What they had in the first one. It's a very mild outbreak. And it had the symptoms, common symptoms like fever, chills, cold. And they thought that it is something somewhat new. Somewhat new because of the reasons that were pretty unique to 1918. So this is 2020. We have all kinds of drugs to combat COVID-19. Like, people are talking. Donald Trump was talking about prophylactic hydroxychloroquine. I'm sure that he's getting excellent advice from Dr. Fauci. India is supplying hydroxychloroquine to the entire world as a prophylactic thing. Even India is advocating as prophylactic medicine to the citizens in India. But still, I advise you to get the advice from a proper doctor, from Love Agarwal. I guess he's the guy who's coordinating the affairs from Center, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. MOHFW. Okay. Now, the origin of Spanish flu is not exactly Spain. It was first reported in Spain. And Spanish people, they called it French flu because they thought it came from France. But they're not sure. So they're pretty humble, very nice doctors in Spain. And when they tried to publish it in the journal Lancet, these publications, the reviewers laughed at it and they called it Spanish flu, but they rejected the publication. First, compare it with the coronavirus that we have right now. We also get this fever, cough, rashes, lack of smell, breathlessness. Lack of smell. Yeah. Have you ever heard of this thing? Lack of smell is a very important indication of this thing. So sensory, loss of sensory perception is a kind of a unique characteristic of coronavirus. This has something to do with the coronavirus that's secreting the ACE2 receptors in the body. That's something that is beyond the scope of this talk. We will not discuss that. But nevertheless, the symptoms between Spanish flu and coronavirus are similar. The origin of that Spanish flu is unknown. Origin means like you have to trace the details back to the patient zero. And those details, like during the World War I, they are impossible to get. And, the governments deliberately, they have hidden the records. Most of the governments, they have to do that to boost the morale of their soldiers and also the people. And this coronavirus, the origin is supposed to be China, the wet animal market of Wuhan. And actually, the whole world is very angry with China from a certain angle, though even this we are not entirely sure whether it really originated from China. It's only a supposition. And here I need to tell you a little thing about the eating habits of Chinese. China, there is a thing called traditional Chinese medicine. One of the fundamental tenets of traditional Chinese medicine is food is medicine, medicine is food. So I've seen a lot of viral WhatsApp messages going on here and there, alleging Chinese that they were eating bats and stuff like that. I know Chinese, and I have been working with them very closely for a lot of time. But I'm sure they don't eat bats unless it is prescribed by a physician. A traditional Chinese doctor would actually prescribe to eat a bat under certain conditions given by him. They need to be adhered to very, very thoroughly. In case you have asthma or certain allied diseases. So in China, food is medicine, medicine is food. So there is a fundamental lack of understanding, from the ways, Chinese ways and the rest of the world ways. So probably, that makes them the buttoned up jokes once in a while. Yeah, one of the things is, their inability to pronounce R. That's another thing. Okay, now, what we have right now is a very severe, apparently very severe coronavirus wave, whereas the Spanish flu first wave was not that very severe, it was mild. So mild that actually people ignored the first wave of Spanish flu. But then what happened? The war was over, the armistice was signed, and a lot of people, even during the war, a lot of the soldiers, when they get wounded, they were sent back to America in ships. And in most of the ships, actually half of the ships got infected. The ships were the main carriers of the disease to the continent. The same thing happened to India also. Those days, India was ruled by the British, and some Indians, they participated in the World War I. And we had very strong military presence of Britain in India. And there used to be a lot of exchange of passengers. Because this is part of the Great Britain, a lot of ships used to come and they used to dock in Bombay. And what happened is these soldiers, they went into their villages, and the villagers who acquired the pandemic, who acquired the influenza from the soldier, they went to some other town, and actually it spread like wildfire in America within a short time. It spread so much like a wildfire, like, the entire world was completely taken by surprise because they had no idea. So far, the only kind of pandemics that were known were measles, cholera, and Black Death. Black Death was something, that wiped off millions and millions, 50, 60 millions. Half of the population of Europe was gone in 14th century. Probably there is this famous story about Ebola. The Ebola used to, the Ebola's presence was there in some of the Asian countries, Turkey, and down the not Ebola, this Black Death is plague. Now, plague presence was there in some of these Turkish nations and some of the Arabian nations in a few countries. And those days, the Ottoman, the king of Turkey, was very strong king. And he used to invent reasons to invade the European Union. So there was this incident, like in the market, there was a drunken brawl one day, and one Muslim soldier was killed by a Christian merchant. So that made this Turkish king invade Italy. And while invading, they brought plague to Italy. And what these Italians of that town, what they did is they kind of fled to another town called Kaffa. Now in Kaffa, they kind of barricaded themselves, and this guy was waging a war. And mysteriously, a lot of people from this Turkish contingent started dying. The reason for that was plague. And when they died, the dead bodies, they get piled up, and suddenly that the general, he got a brilliant idea. He started catapulting those dead bodies into Kaffa town. And that's how dead body virus may not come, but probably he might have catapulted some live people also. Somehow, it got into Kaffa, and from Kaffa, people started fleeing, and it spread entire Europe like wildfire. 50 million people died in the Black Plague. And the second wave of Spanish flu, which was the most fatal, and which was also called Bombay flu in India. Spanish flu for the world, Bombay flu for India, because Indians who docked in Bombay port, they brought this fever to all the corners of the country. And trust me, I believe that at least 12 million people died in India. And millions of people died in America also. And the effect is so dramatic that brought the average life expectancy of America down by 12 years. It is such a terrible way. And now you see the reason why the governments are, at the hooks, they're taking so many precautions. They ask you to lock down, and they're asking you to maintain social distancing. Social distancing is actually a new term. These things were discovered during the earlier pandemic breakouts. See, I told you about the plague outbreak in the 14th century. Now we are actually searching for medicines. Now we are searching for medicines for the coronavirus outbreak. And we are going to apprise the situation of Spanish flu in 1918 in a short while. But in the Middle Ages, actually, there were no cures. The only cures, medical cures that were known, as I told earlier, they were either advised by the divine authority or a human authority. Like when it comes to human authority, it is, it either came from Hippocrates or from Socrates or some Roman philosophers. So some of the things they used to do weird things. This plague gives you scabs. They used to. Some of these cures are associated with the animals. So they get a fresh, healthy chicken, and they pluck the chicken, and they kind of rub the scab with that live chicken. The moment chicken gets the scab, they used to think that the disease transferred from the affected person to the animal. And some people, they used to take certain very interesting concoctions. There is a thing called a 5 thieves concoction, which is still used in homeopathy. These things were very expensive. Like one of the things that was widely used was the dragon horns powder. Dragon horns powder is extremely expensive those days itself. Huge money. Only very wealthy merchants can afford that. So what people used to do is cheaper alternatives of dragon's horn, something like taking arsenic or mercury directly. And the ingestion of arsenic and mercury that killed a lot more people than the disease itself in some parts of the world. And the last but effective one, the only effective one that worked in the 14th century was isolation, social distancing, what we call it today. They completely quarantined the areas, and that kind of stopped the spread. Out of several things, weird things that they tried, one of the things even including the use of leeches to draw the bad blood, because those days they did not have the concept of virus. They used to think that virus is bad blood. Now to draw the bad blood, there used to be some really experts, there very expensive experts, who tame the leeches and they put them on the bodies of the people who are affected. And now those leeches, they are supposed to draw the bad blood from the patient, and the entire process is very expensive. So because it is expensive, poorer guys, peasants, those days, poor people were called peasants. Peasants used to just do a small incision on the wound and allow the blood to flow and throw away the blood. It's a very pathetic, horrible situation because people had no clue. An unknown virus, unseen virus, considered as bad air, pervading the world and killing people, and dead bodies getting piled up. The same thing happened even with Spanish flu 1918. Dead bodies piled up. I believe that you understand the same thing happened with coronavirus also in Italy and in Spain and in Brazil. That's happening now, and even in Mumbai, it's happening. Some I believe that I heard in Mumbai pile up of dead bodies because we only have, just like the hospital beds, we only have limited space to dispose of the bodies, as we have limited space to accommodate in ICUs in hospitals. We also have limited burial space. That leads to a huge amount of backlog. So these things that we have seen earlier, these things have been happening again and again in nature. It's a strange caprice of nature. I believe that it was propounded by Lama, somebody. He said the survival of the fittest. I think after each pandemic, the most resilient, they turn out to stay after the pandemic. But unfortunately, in 1918, the situation is not very different. In 1918, doctors were caught unaware by the Spanish flu. And the kind of medication that was known those days for fever, they used to give bicarbonate of soda. Sodium bicarbonate, they used to give. Even now, in some places, they give bicarbonate of soda. The other medicine that was known was aspirin. Aspirin was first patented by Bayer. Bayer was a kind of world leader. And Bayer is another story, of course. Bayer is a German company. It's a family business. They used to excel in the business of selling sodium salicylate and magnesium salicylate, which was extract of the willow. It's a kind of plant medicine. And as the chemistry progressed, scientists understood, whoever were employed by Bayer, how to make it synthetically, the acetyl salicylic acid. They patented it, and the patent was just expired before the outbreak of 1918. And that led to doctors started prescribing huge quantities of aspirin. They even recommended 30 grams of aspirin. Now we never take, the maximum recommended dose of aspirin is 4 grams. Even if you take it that level, you're going to get lessons in the stomach. You're going to bleed it out. And it can be extremely poisonous when you take aspirin in such huge quantity. There's always a difference between medicine, poison, food. That's how our medicine, our tenet of medicine works here in India. or in the allopathy. Now, this aspirin became the poison, and that led to huge edema. The people who died in the autopsies, they were found to have lungs filled with fluid. At one point of time, your immune response, again, the same thing that I was talking about, that gets activated, and then it's confused whether this is something that is doing good or not doing good. And at the end of the day, the death is very rapid, painful, and people died with complete pulmonary edema. The lung sacs filled with water. Now, when it comes to coronavirus, the situation is different. Here, the autopsy of the patients who died revealed that people are having symptoms of HAPI. HAPI is high altitude pulmonary edema. At high altitudes, actually, lungs, they kind of inflate. I try to tell you how homeostasis works. When you take large amounts of air inside, now let's suppose the pressure we have in this room is 760 millimeters of Hg. The pressure, the partial pressure of air that you have in the blood is only 40 millimeters of Hg or so. Not more than that. Because the pressure is kind of lost, like in the lungs, probably you have 100 millimeters of Hg. By the time they cross this pulmonary wall, the thin tissue that surrounds the areola and stuff like that, we call it. Once it crosses the boundaries, the blood partial pressure of oxygen is not more than 40 Hg. Also, blood also has some certain amount of carbon dioxide. When you go to high altitude, what happens is the pressure decreases. I want to drive attention to the top of Everest. Go to the top of the Everest, the pressure is almost 40-50 millimeters of Hg. So how the breathing works is because of the pressure difference that we have, the lungs, they take up in the bulk flow, the oxygen goes inside. Oxygen contained in the air, and that's sucked into the blood. But then the pressure gradient is so low. The pressure gradient is extremely low. So that creates a kind of very typical situation for the lungs. Okay. Now, that's what we call it as typical high altitude sickness. Because of the drop of oxygen levels in the body, you get all kinds of symptoms. I have seen this in the mountain. When you go to altitudes above 5 kilometers, you get headache, dizziness, and you slow down actually. Even the vehicles slow down because there is not enough oxygen. Now, with coronavirus, one of the symptoms that we have seen is the situation of the lungs is similar to high altitude sickness. It's not filled with liquid because we are not taking aspirin. We are using other sets of medication. Another important contrast between Spanish flu and coronavirus is healthy adults were kind of affected by the Spanish flu. Young people died, pregnant women died, children died. But old people seem to have mysteriously certain amount of immunity with the Spanish flu H1N1. And the coronavirus, what we are seeing is adults over the age of 50, 60, or people with comorbidities. That means people with diabetes or hypertension or with immunocompromised people. Like people who are immunocompromised, that means they have an immune system that has to be controlled by giving them immunosuppressors. So those people, they are getting affected, and actually they are the top 80% of the people who die with coronavirus. And the virus type is both are RNA viruses, and there were certain races that are immune for Spanish flu, but for coronavirus, I have, I'm sensing that probably in Oceania and in some parts of Asia, and even probably the Celtic region, people may have certain amount of resistance, not resistance. Yeah, they may have resistance for this thing. Like as we see the data, we're going to appreciate that. And the only effective measure for both Spanish flu and coronavirus is quarantine. Like quarantine is proper quarantine. Like, people have learned during Spanish flu. Schools, colleges, temples, mosques, all public places are closed. No unnecessary travel. Clamp down of curfew. Social distancing. Person-to-person distance 6 feet. Hallmark. Remember, even now, I think we still have the disease. India has one of the highest rates of, we are recording highest rates of disease right now. Though it's not apparent, though the death rates are not very high, still, when you look at the averages, when you look at the daily figures, I think we are recording 10,000 plus cases. So social distancing is very essential even now. Okay. And in a while, I'm going to show you like how the entire mechanism of public health works. Okay, again, another thing, no handshakes. Actually, this was invented during that time. This handshake is a very popular way of greeting in Britain. World was dominated by Britain those days. So they stopped shaking hands. No parties, no handshakes. And spitting is banned. PPEs are in short supply all the time. You have to make your own PPEs or use something as a PPE. And doctors are in short supply then and now. Ventilators were not, used routinely those days. Ventilators are used, but they are in short supply today. And the ventilator is also another debatable thing with the coronavirus. Like, if somebody is having a weak lung, I don't want to jab a ventilator tube into his lungs because the ventilator injury can also cause death. Because the virus started spreading at such a short time, the world kind of opened up the scientific communication, even though we do not have sufficient data to describe whether people who are dying on ventilator, they are dying 100% because of virus. Actually, to a large extent, they are dying because of virus. But there are also some injuries that were happening with the lung injury because of the intubation. Okay. And vaccines are not available for that. Vaccines are not available for this. But there is a vaccine for flu, which seems to be ineffective. Because most of the people in America, they got these flu shots. They get these flu shots on a yearly basis. Booster doses also. It's ineffective. There was some debate because, in India, the spread started very slow. The whole world looked at India as a model because in India, most of the people, they got this BCG vaccine. In India, like only the vaccine that everybody had is BCG. Polio also most of the people have. And looking at the viral genome, it is suspected that BCG could be effective, but it seems to be a fad. It does not seem to hold a lot of water because in India, the rate of infection is growing. Dr. Razu, I guess that we are crossing the timeline. Please do not hesitate to give me a twinkle, when we have just 5 minutes time. Now, it is a very interesting thing, during Spanish flu, there was alcohol ban in America. A lot of states in America, they have banned liquor, booze ban was there. They banned the sale of alcohol. Like as it is in Gujarat. I think Gujarat is the only dry state in India. And I think even in Andhra Pradesh, N.T. Ramarao tried it once. Tried this alcohol ban. Those days, a lot of states in America, they wanted the temperance because that was post-World War. They wanted to try, alcohol as one of the cure, but alcohol is not available. A lot of people, like the sailors and the soldiers who came from Europe, they started cooking up. They started bootlegging alcohol. Actually, the World War I is not the cause, but the Spanish flu and the alcohol ban that created a huge bootlegging industry in America. Bootlegging is, you make illegal alcohol, hooch. And even that hooch that contains methanol and that killed a lot of people. And I suppose the same thing happened in Iran. Like in Iran also, alcohol ban is there. People started getting illegal alcohol. And at one point of time, a lot of people died in Iran due to this alcohol poisoning. And one of the worst cities that was hit by Spanish flu was Bombay. And right now in India, it is still Bombay, Mumbai. Because in 1918, the name was not changed. And for Spanish flu in America, it was Philadelphia. And for coronavirus, now it's New York. It's one of the worst hit states. Actually, I wasn't noticing the time. Okay, 1 p.m. Got it. What time is it now? 12:30. Excellent. Now, we talked a few scary things about the spread of the disease. How do we know? Again, I'm coming back to the very first question I asked. How do you know? Because God has not told us, no human authority told us, but the experience is going to tell us. One of the experience tells us that there are two things that are actually very critical in estimating the spread of a pandemic. One is the basic reproduction number. The other one is the fixed interval period. What is fixed interval period? Okay, I think this will be, let's suppose the virus takes certain amount of incubation period. And the guy, the person, whoever gets the virus, after incubation, he starts spreading it to person X. Now, there are three scenarios. Which interval is shorter? Like the serial interval, like the time taken for transmission of a person who's incubated to the other person, versus the time that's required for incubation. And another important number we have is the basic reproduction number. Now, out of these two numbers, the fixed interval spread, that's something, the incubation period is one aspect of that. And the fixed interval of spread, the time taken from the person who is fully infected to the second person, and he's in proximity, that is not going to change. The only number that we can control is the basic reproduction number. As I told you, this is like Avogadro number. This number has no units. It's just a number. It's a basic reproduction number. And I gave you an equation for those. This comes out of statistics. This is highly disputed. A lot of people question this, but nevertheless, this is the only straw that we can hold on during a pandemic that is with unknown pathology, unknown medication, and in unknown situation. We try to hold on to the straw, this basic reproduction number, and we try to get the fixed interval spread as soon as possible. Now, we need to see, higher the number, higher the chances of it spreading. You can see that measles spreads very easily, so is conjunctivitis. But the numbers for H1N1 influenza 2009, I think that's more related to America, actually. It's H1N1 influenza spread that came in America, not relevant to us. But SARS is relevant to us. We had some SARS patients. The number is supposed to be 1 to 2.75. And for SARS, I believe that it is touching 3.5. Why I am giving a range? That is another aspect that I would like to discuss, but we do not have time. But I had given the statistical relevance of this thing. Basically, how we arrive at the basic reproduction number is, you take the total number of people infected, you divide it by the total number of contacts, and you multiply it with the number of contacts, time, and that goes on like that. It's basically something that comes out of a lot of thinking, statistics, data. It is more or less a well-balanced guesstimate. It's a guess plus estimate based on data. And that is only the straw that we can hinge upon. And also you see the FIS, like if you have higher FIS, the disease takes longer time to spread. That means, it can be contained easily. Smaller the number of SIS, higher the virulence, as I'm going to show you here. the secondary transmission that actually depends on the same. If the incubation period is more than the serial interval, which is the cause, which is the case with COVID-19, that is the reason why, we are seeing such huge spikes in numbers. Like when it comes to SARS that we had in 2003, the incubation period was shorter than the serial interval. If the serial interval is higher, the spread is likely to be lower. So, such being the case, we understand certain figures, key statistical figures. This R naught, what we call R naught and FIS. FIS for COVID, we understood that it is 4 to 5 days, and R naught is something. Oh, why is growing big? Oh boy, try to make it small. All right, now. The R naught is between 1.5 to 3.5, and it is extremely important for us to bring the R naught down below 1. If the R naught is 1 person is infecting 1 person. If R naught is 3.5, 1 person is infecting 3.5 people, and the transmission happens in a matter of 4 to 5 days. That means 1 person infecting 3.5 people. And 3.5 people, in fact, 3 into 3.5 people, 3 into 3 people in a similar portion of time. So, like, the numbers you see, you are likely to see the numbers in a while, if you have time. They get really, really alarming. In a matter of days, 1 person can infect, 1 person's infection can take the numbers down to thousands and even hundreds of thousands. And how do we handle this thing? I think globally we follow this hammer and dance principle. If you don't do anything, the infection is going to grow like wildfire and it's going to wipe off a percentage of the population. A percentage of the population is something, what we call it, case fatality rate in this case is, for India it's around 3%. So if you allow this to happen, we will have 3% deaths of the entire population. And 3% of even 100 crores of people is not small, 3 crores of people. That is huge burden on the medical system, huge burden on the economy, and it is a very horrible, pathetic loss of life. And if you just mitigate it, the line is going to be something else. The hammer principle makes sure a hammer. What is hammer? What we had on March 24th. What is up? He asked us to maintain 1 day lockdown. 24th, is it? 24th. 1 day lockdown. And then it led to a kind of a lockdown we still have. I believe that we're not totally out of lockdown. Now only things started easing up. It was almost 60 days lockdown where you're not supposed to go out. You're not supposed to meet even your relatives. Travel, everything. Total everything is banned. And I think I don't have to explain further because you have felt this. You have seen this already. So that's what is called hammer. The dance comes next. Actually, in June, we are in the dance phase. By the time, during the period of hammer, like what we're going to do is, I have listed out. The hammer means people are going to stay where they are, stay put. They cannot spread the virus. At least one thing is taken care of. Now, this gives us sufficient time to recruit personnel. This also gives us to buy things. We didn't have PPEs. We could buy PPEs. We didn't have ventilators. We could buy ventilators. And we didn't have proper testing kits. We could buy testing kits. A lot of things could be done during the hammer period. Once the hammer period is done, the dance period comes, where you mildly loosen up the restrictions, you allow the economic activity to happen. You need to understand the hammer comes down with heavy cost. If you do not have the day-to-day business operations, I think the economy is going to suffer as a direct consequence. Some of the industries like hospitality, travel, they're in a serious problem right now. Serious problem because The activities. So therefore, the dance period comes to allow livelihood to spread. So it's always the versus. It is a balance between the hammer is allowing the life to grow, the dance is to allow the livelihood to happen. Unfortunately, in India, we had this issue of migrant workers. Migrant workers was something that was people thought unawares. But in principle, this is what everybody does, and it's a time-tested principle, the hammer and dances. Right now, we're dancing. Now, how many COVID cases are there? I think these questions everybody asked, and I think we try to answer and we try to satisfy ourselves. I think we're going to leave these things here. But one major, I think only one point I want to stress here, the asymptotic cases that are capable of spreading the viral disease, they are the things that are going to be the differentiating factor. Now, I believe that we have a daily growth rate of 4.5%. Like I have data for the last 15 days, and rate of death is around 4%. And you just try a simple plot, okay? Simple plot between the growth rate, daily case growth rate. To draw a simple plot between the number of cases on a time scale, the slope gives you the growth rate. And actually, you can extrapolate the slope to get the rate of doubling. So that's how Love Agarwal tells us once in a while that, we are good, like our rate of doubling is increased from 11.3 days to 14.5 days. It's not very difficult to do. You users can do it. If only you have the data, you just have to extrapolate the graph. So this is how it looks like in India. Right now, we have data for the last 15 days. The past 15 days, the growth rate seems to be simmering down from 5.4% to 4.5%. The death rate is almost constant, but don't be alarmed about the death rate, because death rate is a culmination of the higher growth rate in cases that we had earlier. So, as the growth rate of cases that comes down, the death rate increases briefly, and then that also comes down. Let's hope for the best. Now, where India stands in terms of rate doubling, this is another very important thing. And Mr. Love Agarwal keeps saying that India is very nicely placed, but when you look at the countries that are worst affected, so far the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Australia wasn't affected, Spain and Iran, they had the worst possible effect. The pandemic, but looks like it's coming down. The curve it is quite past its peak. Now, I think the first wave is almost going to be over in some of these countries. The first wave. I'll come to first wave later, because usually the pandemic comes in first wave, second wave, third wave, and usually by the time fourth wave, people get herd immunity. Okay. Right now, the alarming thing for India is the doubling rate. That's still 17 days. We are still in the growth phase. Daily number of cases are touching almost 10,000 plus. We should be doing. I think we have already gone through this thing. I think I'll skip this slide. So only one detail that I would like to touch in this thing. What is CFR? CFR is case fatality rate. The case fatality rate versus the case recovery rate. How many people are actually dying? Okay, per 100 patients, per 100 recorded patients, COVID, how many deaths actually happened? These figures are actually dicey, because we never know the exact number of patients unless the testing is done. And the testing is a little lax in India, but nevertheless, we have to go by whatever the figures that are available. So going by the figures, for India, Iran, and most of the countries, the same problems. It's not limited to India. Now, the CFR is case fatality ratio, and the CRR is the case recovery ratio. Like how many people are recovering from the case. And we can see that China is exemplarily good, 94.33% of the people have recovered. Iran is also doing good. Unless there is a second wave, they're still, they're past the danger. India, the case is 47.83%. That means we still have people in the hospitals. But the best thing, solacing thing that we get is the CFR-CRR ratio. The CFR-CRR ratio lower, we are actually, it seems we are in a better situation. There is a number of people died divided by the number of people recovered. It is less than 0.1 for us. It's around 0.08. I guess only Oceania has better figures than us. Russia is better, 0.06. And when you look at the continents, Oceania is still the best, 0.015. And I'm going to have some data for the Celtic regions, and Baltic region, not Celtic, Baltic region. I think Baltic region people, they have a certain amount of, they're more resistant than others. And this is how the situation is in India. I'm not going to go through these graphs because these graphs are based on data that is available to us. Okay, now we have crossed 200,000 cases and we are crossing so many deaths. And the trend in active cases, you look at the three graphs, the third thing that shows certain amount of flattening. This is something an encouraging thing. If it is going very steeply, that means it's a cause of concern. As it is flattening, we hope to see that it goes down soon. That's what the message I would like to give you. I think these statistics also I'm going to skip at this point. And even these statistics, there's a cumulative number of deaths. These statistics also we skip because India is somewhere in between these things. We're not. But if you look at the whole thing, the only point I would like to impress upon is right now US is the worst affected country. US is the worst affected country because of certain policy slowdown in the country. Because Trump was a little dubious about taking up the social distancing, about a lot of other things, about slowing down the economy. They were worried about the livelihood economy protection initially, and they have taken very, very hesitant things. And what Mr. Trump believed is he stopped flights from China, and he thought that is very good. Unfortunately, the spread of virus doesn't work that way. A lot of people who thought that they stopped flights from China, they had really, really bad surprise awaiting them. Okay, now we are coming to the crux. Unfortunately, we just have 10 minutes of time here. So I try to cut short some of the history. Historically, I won't tell you that the first antibacterial discovered, salvarsan, in 1910. And from then till 50 years, no antiviral was discovered. The very first antiviral discovered was in 1962. That is for a DNA virus infection. That's a herpes simplex. And for years to come, we only had drugs happening for HSV infections. That's a DNA-based virus. And most of these drugs, they closely resemble the nucleotides. I believe that you will not be able to see these structures in this slide. But in this slide, you can see the structures clearly. Most of these structures, that closely resemble nucleotides. That's one very interesting feature that, I can discuss on for quite a long time. But unfortunately, we do not have time. I'm going to wrap it up in 5 minutes by telling you. Again, coming back to the comparisons that we had with Spanish flu and this COVID. Spanish flu, they had used as prophylactic medicine the famous drug aspirin. And I told you what happened. That led to pulmonary edema and a lot of people died because of the poison. Hydroxychloroquine, which is recommended as a prophylactic for COVID, is not that bad. But that does have issues, It did kill some people because that will disturb that will cause heart arrhythmia that would disturb the certain patterns in your body. To put it, in a very naive terms. Now, we have been using hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic medicine against the malarial parasite for a long time, and there's no problem in that. We have at least a reasonably stable prophylaxis. What is prophylaxis? Using a medicine as a preventive medicine. I do not recommend any of you to use any of these medicines. It is a note of caution. Also, a disclaimer: this is only for educational purpose. You're not supposed to take any medicine on your own. Medicine has to be recommended, prescribed by a doctor. Okay. Now, after this prophylaxis, we were totally caught unaware. After the infection only, we got the viral genome. And the viral genome, a lot of work goes behind drug discovery. Right now, the only option we have is to run maze through whatever the known drugs that we have. That's what we call it, drug repurposing. And people have started using oseltamivir initially. Oseltamivir was the drug of choice for SARS 2003 outbreak, but it didn't have any effect. People also have used lopinavir and ritonavir, and that also didn't work that very well. People have used ribavirin, no effect. Tenofovir, no effect. Gilead Sciences recently, declared that remdesivir is working. It is decreasing the hospital stay of intubated patients. Intubated means like people who had ventilated in that from 14 days to 11 days. That's a pretty interesting thing. Favipiravir is another drug that has been accepted everywhere. Actually, it's a Japanese Toyoma Chemical Corporation's drug bought by several companies. I think in China, Hyson Farm that has licensed it, bought the license, and India Strides Aqualabs is making it. And I think quite a few number of companies in Hyderabad also do it. Actually, this time the contribution of India from the times of Spanish flu to COVID-19 has increased in a manifold way. Actually, people are looking up at India for these drugs, for these APIs, seriously. And that is actually a very comforting thing in that time. At least we have done, some solid work for a period of time. We're in a better situation. And just to remind you that these drugs, this favipiravir, was originally tested for Ebola and Lassa viruses, kind of discontinued because of the high toxicity. But it's working for coronavirus, at least partially. We're good with that. And to run through this thing, drug discovery is a long process. It takes 15 years. So repurposing is faster. And the last thing that I want to tell you is about the vaccine development. Even vaccine development takes a long time. There are 3 golden rules to develop any vaccine. The vaccine itself should not be the poison killing the patient. The vaccine should be safe. And it should be sufficiently antigenic. And it should have minimum booster dose requirements. And the whole, it's a gamut of developing a vaccine is a complex process. And it takes a lot of cooperation between the countries. And India is actually in the forefront in that. We have this Institute of Serology, Pune. And we also have Bharat Biotechnics in Hyderabad, run by Dr. Krishna. He's a different Dr. Krishna. And we have quite a few other biotech companies that are actively involved with, international research institutions that are developing viruses. And all these companies, not all the companies, especially the Institute of Virology and Serum Institute, they are actively engaged in, they are very, very actively engaged in transferring the data to GISAID. And what is GISAID? GISAID is a global organization that we have in Switzerland that collates all the viral genomic data of influenza viruses. They have all the entire viral genomic data that gets updated on a weekly basis. And based on the database in GISAID, we know that the COVID virus is still in antigenic drift phase. It did not enter the shift phase. Drift means there are a couple of mutations happening in the virus genome on a monthly basis. They don't have any schedule. Like, on second I have one mutation, on 15, no such thing. Sometimes you can have 3 mutations happening in 1 week. But these are all simple mutations. They are not going to affect the virulence of this virus. Drift is only happening. Antigen did not happen. And we have a lot of data right now in terms of the virus. The vaccine may come, but vaccine may not come as soon as you expect. But this is extraordinary times. The amount of work on the vaccine development that happened for COVID is something unique that never happened in the history of humankind. People worked on tenterhooks, and I'm sure the vaccine is going to be developed in a short time. But it is never going to be, as you think, October, November kind of thing. It takes longer. But still, it is really, really, really fast. And I'm going to skip all these questions, which I thought if we had time to discuss, but maybe another time. One last thing that I want to tell you is about the testing and confirmation. And the golden test for this thing is the RT-qPCR test. This is not an antigen test. It is reverse transcriptase polymeric chain reaction test. What is reverse transcription? Transcription of RNA to DNA is reverse transcription because this is a RNA virus. And RNA has to be transcribed into DNA. And the DNA, because, we collect nasal and oral swabs. The oral swabs, they may contain small amount of virus only. That has to be multiplied for detection. Basically, this is a fluorescence-based detection technique. And this is multiplied, actually. It has to be polymerized. It's called a polymerase chain reaction. Probably we can discuss this some other time, like how the whole thing happens. Reverse transcription and how exactly the test works. People use a Bio-Rad equipment for doing this thing. And at Colabs, we're also having a pretty novel testing process, like we're in the testing phase right now. This does not deal with RT-qPCR or anything. It's a different kind of test. And this is going to be a pretty rapid test and very inexpensive test. I believe that, it is not going to cost you more than $50. You get the result within 10 minutes. So I believe that we have crossed the timeline. And I move on to the acknowledgements. Ms. Paramita Das, she's our cost accountant. She helped me with a lot of statistics. As you can expect, I'm not really good with the Excel sheets and stuff like that. I need assistance, and she has given me a lot of assistance. And we have collected the data from John Hopkins, Worldometer, BNO Graphs, World Health Organization, and the raw data is transformed into some of these statistically significant things. For further information, you can always write to me. And thank you very much for your kind attention.
So, thank you, Dr. Krishna, for his excellent and wonderful thing. Now you can stop your screening. Now, requested participants, and you can have any kind of queries. You please raise your hand so that we will unmute and you can ask your questions.
Yeah. I hope that I have
anyone from any side? Anyone from have any questions from the audience? Hello?
No, sir. No, sir.
Is that very good?
Okay, very nice.
This will be act like a normal PM junction. So we are a normal PM.
Everybody is unmuted now. Unmuted now. Now anybody can ask.
Voltage.
Hello? Dr. Ellen Murthy is there? Please raise your hand. So, Dr. Krishna, it is really a wonderful thing. Wonderful in the sense, not a simple thing to say like this. Almost for about 2 hours, we had an excellent session where actually you were given a wonderful information in connection to the genesis, the continual changes in the virus, and what had been happening since decades in the world, of course, in India, right from Spanish flu to coronavirus, COVID-19. What is the present status in the entire globe, of course, in India, regarding the generation of vaccines and medicines? And we're so happy to see that such kind of wonderful information you must not have found elsewhere, because it's a huge analysis right from the day one when actually this particular COVID-19 case was reported in the China. The data is there with Dr. Krishna, and he was given. It is a wonderful information. Only because of my request, he was able to just share this data with us, and it is being published in a very excellent nature kind of journals, because the world is in need of such a wonderful what you call information. And it's this information can be used by our the computer science faculty or fraternity as a kind of the big data analysis, and it's really useful for the scientific field who are really working for drug discovery, drug designing, and medicinal discovery and medicinal designing. He was clearly emphasized what actually the drugs like the vaccines and medicines are required for this, what is actually happening. And also he specified the importance of Indian contribution, because many of the people knows that India is not doing this kind of research. Simply they will be saying that in US it is being done, in UK it is being done, not like that, because we are the number one exporter for like what you call this kind of the hydrochloroquine and all. Now we are contributing a lot as far as this particular process designing drug discovery is also doing. Of course, we are running we in collaboration with foreign laboratories also, and at the same time, on this particular our expert Dr. Krishna, along with his team, is also having an excellent contribution. Actually, it is a fortunate for us to have his time here at the moment, because he's in very big time, where actually he's working for this kind of drug discovery, drug designing regarding this kind of COVID-19 vaccine medicine. And apart from that, he was also mentioning that in his labs, he is developing a kind of diagnostic kit where, in fact, a COVID-19 patient can be identified within 2 days. This is a big relief to anyone, because many of the people are feeling that if you are having any kind of isolation or what you call the quarantine, it takes 15 days time to get our kind of the COVID-19 result, like maybe the positive or negative. But we need not have to feel worry about this, because within 2 days we are going to get this kind of diagnosis. It is a wonderful, and this credit goes to Dr. Krishna and his team, and he is working with so many IITs. So many IITs are working and getting supervision, and IISc, Central University, and of course many of the universities in China, Germany, Japan, and US. They are working with Dr. Krishna. It's really a wonderful situation to have such a kind of an expert researcher, active researcher, active research in the sense the real time worker for the real problem is practically indeed for us to have his presence. So I really fortunate enough that this kind of information may be passed to many of the people. Actually, there are so many doctors and researchers need this kind of information. And I thank everyone. These are my contact details. You can contact all these kind of things. And I already in chat box I given you. You can mail those who have already attended for this session. You can mail your WhatsApp number, and with a contest that feedback link for international web talk. Then after 1 o'clock, I will send you that feedback link, and the feedback link in case you need this e-certificate for this participation, because this is multidisciplinary talk, and you can feel proud that you are being a part of this kind of huge research involved expertise discussions. So you can give that, and maybe before 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock, I will send you. After 1 o'clock, that means it's already 1. Before 2 o'clock, I will send you this particular feedback link. You can send the feedback, and these participants who really enjoyed this thing, who given this kind of feedback, will be given this e-certificate maybe tomorrow. So I think it's really wonderful, and I want to conclude this kind of session by just once again telling my deep gratitude to Dr. Krishna. And one more thing I want to tell you all, that he is one of my biggest friends. He is one of my thickest friends. And we are being friends almost more than 2 decades. We were classmates, we were co-researchers, and we used to share the knowledge like that. And we have a huge team, and actually many of our co-researchers, because of they're already arranged, because many of them are already engaged with these kind of works, and they're unable to participate. It is a really wonderful thing that a real-time researcher is sharing his thoughts and he's sharing his expertises to an academician, and it will be really wonderful. And thank you very much, Dr. Krishna, on behalf of my institutions, Guide institutions, in particular Guide Engineering College, all my faculty members and the students and the participants, and really wonderful. And pray God that India will still lead to the better position with all these kind of things. We'll definitely become a kind of global player. We will mitigate all these problems, and all the activities will go on smooth as usual, as we are expecting in India. So thank you all for your participation. Once again, Dr. Krishna, thank you so much. Jai Hind. Namaste all. Bye. Now we can share. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now you can leave, Dr. Krishna. Thank you.